Some people are way too quick to judge, and in this hospital, assumptions don't just ruin reputations, they can cost careers. When a woman walks through those doors expecting respect but is treated as if she's invisible, the truth about her identity will leave everyone speechless. Have you ever been unfairly judged? Tell us in the comments below. The moment Vanessa Carter stepped into the hospital lobby, she could feel the weight of the stares. But these weren't the kind of glances that acknowledged her value. No admiration, no recognition, not even curiosity. These were the looks reserved for people who were seen as out of place. She had been here before, felt this before, again and again. The hesitation, the assumption, the silent question hanging in the air. Do you even belong here? The receptionist barely even looked up when Vanessa reached the front desk. A middle-aged white woman, glasses sliding down her nose, fingers flying across the keyboard like she was punishing it. Her long nails, chipped red polish, clicked against the keys with irritation. Vanessa waited. 1 second. 2. Still nothing. Excuse me? Vanessa's voice was smooth but firm. The receptionist sighed dramatically before looking up, her expression already painted with annoyance. Visiting hours start at noon, she said flatly. Come back later. Vanessa blinked. I'm not here for visiting hours. The receptionist let out another loud, exaggerated sigh, like she had a million things to do, other than the job she was currently avoiding. Then what do you need? Before Vanessa could even answer, a passing nurse, young, blonde, dressed in bright pink scrubs, glanced at her, then stopped in her tracks. You look lost, the nurse said, flashing a condescending smile. Are you looking for someone? Vanessa stood tall, keeping her posture calm. But inside, she could feel it, the frustration, the heat rising in her chest. She had worked too hard to be respected in rooms like this, and yet, here she was again, treated like she didn't belong. I'm exactly where I need to be, Vanessa said smoothly. But before she could say another word, a security guard stepped in. His name tag read Officer Mendez, and he had the build of someone who took his job way too seriously, especially when it came to the wrong kind of people in the right kind of places. Everything okay here? Mendez asked, giving Vanessa a once-over, his stance shifting into unnecessary authority. The receptionist barely hid her smirk. She seems confused about where she is. Vanessa met Mendez's stare. I'm not confused. Mendez crossed his arms, making himself appear even larger. You sure about that? He challenged. Because you're standing at the front desk during peak hours, and no one seems to know why you're here. Vanessa inhaled slowly. This wasn't new. Not at all. It had happened when she was a medical student, a resident, even as a fully licensed doctor. But this was going to be the last time. I'm here because this is my hospital, Vanessa said, enunciating each word with intention. Mendez scoffed, glancing at the receptionist and the nurse like they were all sharing some inside joke. I don't think so. Vanessa tilted her head. That's funny because the hospital board thinks otherwise. Just like that, the laughter in Mendez's throat vanished. The nurse took a step back, her smirk melting into uncertainty. Vanessa? She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. I don't think you know who I am, she said, voice steady as steel. The receptionist shifted uncomfortably in her chair, finally sensing that something was off. Look, ma'am, Dr. Vanessa Carter, Vanessa interrupted. Chief of Medicine. The words hit like a grenade. Silence. The receptionist's eyes widened behind her glasses. The nurse's face turned an uncomfortable shade of red. And Mendez? The same man who was seconds away from escorting Vanessa out now looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Vanessa let them sit in that moment, let them feel their shame. Then, from behind her, a voice broke the silence. Dr. Carter's. A tall man in a sharp navy blue suit strode forward, his smile warm, his handshake firm. Dr. Malcolm Reese, the hospital's director, a man who actually knew who she was. Vanessa shook his hand, unwavering. I hope they've been treating you well, Dr. Reese said, his tone light. The receptionist let out a nervous laugh. The nurse opened her mouth, then quickly shut it. Mendez took a step back, suddenly very interested in the floor tiles. Vanessa smiled. "They've been accommodating." Dr. Reese chuckled. "Let's get you up to the boardroom. Everyone's eager to meet you." "Of course," Vanessa replied. But before following him, she let her gaze flick over the three faces now drenched in regret. She didn't need to say anything else. They already knew. As Vanessa walked toward the elevators, she felt their stares burning into her back. But this time it wasn't judgment. It was fear. It was regret. And this time, she was the one with the power. The same people who dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an outsider, they were now sitting in a boardroom, waiting to meet their new chief of medicine. But when Vanessa walks in, their confidence crumbles. How will they react when the woman they ignored is suddenly the one in charge? Vanessa Carter strode down the hospital corridor beside Dr. Malcolm Reese, her heels clicking against the spotless tile floor. The tension from the front desk still lingered in the air behind her, but she had bigger things to focus on now. She had a statement to make. Ahead, the boardroom doors loomed, polished wood, a symbol of power. Inside, the decision-makers, the leaders, the people who shaped this hospital's future. Some had heard her name before, read about her work, seen her speak at conferences. But most had no idea she was a Black woman. And that had always been the problem. Dr. Reese pushed open the doors, stepping in first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, smiling broadly. "Allow me to introduce our new chief of medicine, Dr. Vanessa Carter." Silence. Every head turned. Every expression shifted. Vanessa had seen this reaction before. The shock. The quick recalculation. The realization that their assumptions had failed them. Dr. Gregory Langston, an older white man who had held unchecked power for years, barely hid his surprise, his fingers tightening on the armrest of his chair. Dr. Sophia Patel, who had heard the rumors about Vanessa's hiring, gave a subtle nod of approval. But the best reactions? The ones who had dismissed her just minutes ago. The receptionist, now pouring water for board members, her hands trembling. The nurse, standing against the wall, eyes darting between the real power in the room. And Vanessa? She just smiled. The room was filled with power players, the decision-makers of the hospital. And then there was Mendez. The security guard who had tried to escort her out now stood stiffly near the exit, silent, uncomfortable. Vanessa let them sit in it. She didn't rush to speak. She didn't offer them an easy way out. Instead, she moved with purpose, slow, deliberate, toward the seat at the head of the table. And then she sat down. "First, I'd like to thank Dr. Reese and the hospital board for entrusting me with this role," Vanessa said, her voice smooth, controlled. "It is an honor to lead this institution and ensure that it continues to provide the highest standard of medical care." A few board members nodded, some forcing polite smiles. But Vanessa wasn't done. "Before we discuss policies and future initiatives," she continued, her gaze razor-sharp as it swept across the room, "I need to make something very clear." She let the silence stretch. "When I walked into this hospital today, I was treated with disrespect." A ripple of tension moved across the table. The receptionist froze, nearly overfilling a glass of water. Mendez shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated with the floor. "I was dismissed. Ignored. And, at one point, security was called on me for nothing more than standing at the front desk." Dr. Langston cleared his throat, trying and failing to hide his unease. "Dr. Carter, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding," he offered. "Our staff is trained to ensure only authorized personnel." Vanessa lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "A misunderstanding?" Her tone remained steady, measured. A misunderstanding would have been one person making a mistake. But when a receptionist, a nurse, and security all participate in that mistake, it's not a misunderstanding. Silence. Dead. Silent. Dr. Reese folded his hands in front of him, watching but not interfering. He wanted the board to sit in this reality. Vanessa leaned forward. "If that's how I was treated as a doctor, as the new chief of medicine, what does that tell me about how our patients are being treated? Especially those who don't fit a certain expectation." The question landed like a blow. Some board members averted their eyes. Others looked guilty. Finally, Dr. Patel, the only one who had openly supported Vanessa's appointment, spoke up. "This is a conversation we need to have," she said firmly. "Because if this happened to Dr. Carter, it's happening to others." Vanessa nodded. "Which brings me to my first initiative as chief of medicine." She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and placed it firmly on the table. "We are implementing a mandatory bias training program for all hospital employees," she announced. "Doctors, nurses, administrative staff, security, everyone." A murmur swept through the board. Dr. Langston frowned. "Is that really necessary?" Vanessa turned to him, meeting his gaze head-on. "You tell me," she said. "Because from where I was standing earlier today, it absolutely is." Langston shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Vanessa let the weight of her words settle before continuing. "This training will not be optional. Failure to complete it will result in disciplinary action." She let that sink in. "Additionally, I'll be implementing a mystery patient program. Hospital staff will be anonymously evaluated on their interactions with patients. Because if this hospital wants to call itself one of the best, then we need to ensure that every patient is treated like they belong here." Another murmur, this time quieter. Vanessa leaned back. "I take my position very seriously," she said. "And I expect everyone in this hospital to do the same." She let her gaze linger on the staff members who had belittled her just hours ago. Mendez lowered his head. The receptionist looked away.